So hi everyone, this is Gary from Cybus. I have the big honor to show you today how the connector is working, but before we can start with that, I have to show you how a commissioning file is written. Because the commissioning file is basically the file which is telling the connector what to do. So which machine to connect, which dashboard to show, which data source or data user, like a database, to connect to. So let's start. What I prepared here is an example of a full machining center setup where we have like a data source, which is a Modbus TCP interface, and we would like to show or visualize the data in a dashboard, in this case in a Grafana dashboard. We start with the metadata here, which is like basic information about the use case we have. So we have a name, we have an icon, provider, and so on and so forth. So very easy to understand, I hope. Second thing we have here are definitions. And definitions you can imagine as variables. So you can define a variable here and can reuse it later in the commissioning file. Like, for example, this Modbus address here. So I'll come back to that later. And the third thing, which is obviously most important, are the resources. You can always see it. It's more than the other two tabs here. So let's start with the first resource. Or let's start with a little overview. So there are different types of resources. We can, let's say, activate and use on a connector. There's the resource container, there's the resource connection, there's the resource endpoint, there's the resource volume, and there's the resource mapping. Let's go through them very quick. So let's start with the container. In this case, we would like to pull a container from the Cybus registry, and this is actually the container which is simulating our data later. The second resource we have is a connection. This is the connection we have to establish to the actual Modbus interface, which is in this case, of course, simulated within the container and resource number 1. After that, we have several endpoints. An endpoint is always an address within the data source, so within the connection we would like to connect to. So we have a connection or an endpoint current state here, which is available under the address 0 on that Modbus connection we've defined here, right? And as you can see here, we are using the variable default Modbus address, which we were defining under definitions on top of the commissioning file. So then we have more endpoints here. We have the current tool, we have the coolant level available on that Modbus interface, and we also have the spindle speed. So that's it basically for our data collection. We have a Modbus connection and we have different endpoints on that Modbus. The next thing we would like to do is we would like to somehow establish or install a dashboard. For that, we need another container, including an InfluxDB, which is basically our time series database we're using in that case, so where the data can basically flow in. Next thing we have is a container where we have a Grafana dashboard inside. So Grafana is an open source software we're using here just to visualize data. And another container which we need, which is basically pushing data from the InfluxDB into that dashboard. So these are all container resources we need. Next thing are volumes. A volume is basically resource which is able to persist data, to save the data, even if the service is turned off. You will see later how that works. So it's kind of our safety net, let's call it, in case we disable a service on the connector, persisting some data. The next thing is we have a so-called ingress route resource here, which is basically our HTTP front end, which we configure here. And last but not least, which is not really necessary for our use case here, but in case we want to like to make that Modbus data available to other data consumers using the MQTT broker within the connector, we can define the mappings here. And that's already the commissioning file and all we need to actually connect to a Modbus device and at the same time configure the Grafana dashboard to visualize that data from the Modbus. So see you again in the connector then.